Hello everybody, Trevor here. Like my top 5 worst Renaissance era episodes video, this one is long overdue, and it is called my top 25 best Andrew Brenner episodes. The reason this took so long to make is because I had to binge watch some of my favorite episodes from season 17 through 21 over and over again, but I finally picked the best of the best. So today, I'm going to do a top 25 best episodes in the Andrew Brenner era. For this video, I'll be picking 5 of each of seasons 17 through 21. Some will be a tie of 2 or 3 since some of them connect to each other. And because of that, I'm going to have to split the video into a few parts, otherwise it would be too long. And please note that these will not be in perfect order because I want to talk about one from each season at a time. So with that out of the way, let's get chugging. Number 25, Confused Coaches. In this episode, Gordon and Spencer compete against each other, which upsets their passengers. To be quite honest, I love the rivalry between Gordon and Spencer because not only they're both very fast, but are also express engines. I even like the parts where Sir Tom Hat trips over a toy train and some of the passengers rolling around the carriage is like a cartwheel. Oh, and not to mention the awesome fireworks at the very end since it is a New Year's Day episode. But the reason this is extremely low on the list is because this was unfortunately the very last episode of season 21. Not only that, but this season has only 18 episodes total, which makes it the weakest of the Renaissance era. There was also going to be 26 episodes total for this season, but because of Big World Big Adventures, they had to drop some. Number 24, Steamy Stafford. Stafford learns to act like a steam engine in order to impress some children, but soon his chugging noises get out of hand when he accidentally scares off Farmer Cole's lambs. This is the first episode I've watched in terms of a sneak peek to the Renaissance era for the show, and I thought it was great. I like the quiet moments, including the part where Stafford was listening to the lambs and helps Farmer Cole find them. And at the end, Stafford tells Thomas and Percy that he won't be making steamy sounds anymore, and therefore prefers to be a quiet electric engine. Oh, and I even like the part where Stafford winks at the audience at the end. I'm also happy that Stafford got another chance to shine after his debut appearance in Welcome Stafford. In addition, in terms of execution about being quiet, this episode does a better job of doing that than Calm Down Caitlin. Not to say that Calm Down Caitlin was bad in terms of writing, it's just that Caitlin is kind of annoying in that episode, so therefore, Steamy Stafford wins as the number 24 spot on this list. Number 23, Thomas and the Emergency Cable. In this episode, Thomas meets a Welsh birdwatcher who pulls Annie's emergency cable by mistake because he thought he heard the sound of a rare bird he was looking for and wanted to see it. This caused Thomas's train to be late and Annie's wheels to be flattened. And because of that incident, Thomas refused to pick up the birdwatcher again until the lady with the big hat pulled the emergency cable because she needed to get off the train. First of all, I like Joe Mills as the birdwatcher in this story. I think it suits him very well. And I also enjoy Teresa Gallagher as the lady with the big hat. And thirdly, I even like the episode's message that whether you're in a bad mood or not, you need to do your job right or something like that. Oh, and I also love the fact that the rare bird turns out to be a woodpecker, which does make sense if you watch the episode. Number 22, Den and Dart. Because of Mavis's accident at Farquhar Quarry, Den had to work all by himself while Dart had to stay in the diesel works to look after Mavis. But they both fear of being separated from each other. I know how these two feel about being separated from each other because they're a team, and sometimes I hate having to work by myself when I had to. Heck, I even felt bad for Den when he was teased by the troublesome trucks. I also like the part where Toby and Henrietta helped build Den's confidence by telling him to be brave and independent enough to shunt those trucks into place. Overall, it was very nice to have an episode starring both Den and Dart, even if they had to be separated for a while. It just shows that sometimes even when you are alone, you can still do your job very well. Number 21, Sydney Sings. Finally, an episode starring Sydney! In this story, Percy has had an accident and Sir Thomas Hat relies on Sydney to get new wheels at the docks. Meanwhile, Thomas teaches Sydney how to sing a song about what you need to do to get the job done so that he won't forget. But because Sydney's a forgetful engine, he soon forgot about what his job was. So instead, he does other jobs before doing his real job. I do like the catchy song that Thomas taught him, as well as Whiff's words of wisdom that elephants never forget, and even a flashback to the missing Christmas decorations episode, which I'll get to another time. But the best part of this episode had to be the return of the Red Express coaches. Which begs the question, why didn't Hit Entertainment do this in the first place when they were making The Adventure Begins? Oh well, at least they brought him back now. Now let's talk about Sydney for a minute. I like this character because his personality reminds me of Dory from Finding Nemo. Even though I didn't add him in my top 5 diesel engines video, but this episode in particular deserves a spot on this list. Number 20 is a tie between the Christmas Coffee Pot and Over the Hill. This is a tie at 2 because not only the Christmas Coffee Pot is about the return of Glenn, but it also follows up to Over the Hill, which is an even better episode, in my opinion. Let's first talk about Glenn. Ever since his first appearance in The Adventure Begins, I was expecting him to return in Season 19, but he didn't. Thankfully, he came back in Season 20, where it was revealed that he was stationed from place to place on Sodor until Marion found him one day. I'm also thankful that the Earl decides to return Glenn to his original beauty and make him part of his estate railway. Now let's move on to Over the Hill. This one, in my opinion, is one of the best follow-ups in the Andrew Brenner era because it shows chemistry between Glenn and Steven. One day, Steven challenges Glenn to a race, which ends up in a tie at Nafford Station. There are other things I like about Over the Hill, including Steven's brief mention of the Rain Hill Trials, the Eye of the Tiger instrumental, the slow rendition of Jingle Bells while the two were racing at the same speed, and I even thought it was pretty funny when Glenn teases Gordon about being a young engine. However, the absolute best part of this episode has to be the Earl planning to build a railway museum with the two of them being the main attraction, which unfortunately never happened after the events of Season 20 because of Mattel's stupid decisions with Season 21 and Big World Big Adventures. Seriously, I wanted there to be a railway museum on Sodor. And if that ever happens, which I doubt, we could have also seen the other engines from the Rain Hill Trials, or maybe we could have gotten Neil from the Sodor Mainland Railway. But no, Mattel had to drop that in order to make way with Big World Big Adventures. And those are the reasons why these two episodes are on the lower spectrum of this list. Number 19, Scruffs Makeover. Well, it's about time we got an episode starring Scruff because he hasn't gotten a lot of dialogue since Season 14. Anyways, in this episode of Season 17, Scruff was sent to the steamworks to get cleaned up, which he didn't like at first, but after looking at his reflection, he decides to stay clean and not do his job at Whiff's waste dump. I think this is one of the best episodes of Season 17 because not only Scruff finally spoke again in this season, but I do like the bit where Whiff mentions the cars on Siding 3, which I thought was a pretty well detailed thing to say in a preschool show. Later, after the engines told Scruff that he needs to do his job, he sadly decides to return to the waste dump but only to get dirty again. But Scruff quickly learns that getting dirty is part of the job. And I thought it was a nice message because sometimes you have to get dirty if you're going to do a job at a place like Whiff's waste dump, so therefore, Scruffs Makeover deserves the number 19 spot on this list. Number 18, Duncan and the Grumpy Passenger. When it comes to Duncan episodes in the Andrew Brenner era, this one in my opinion is the best of them all. This is where Duncan had to deal with a grumpy passenger who does nothing but complain. He wanted to impress the guy, but to no avail, and soon learns that doing your job is more important than to waste time pleasing somebody. And that's why I love this episode. Believe me, when I worked at a grocery store, I sometimes had to deal with rude and grumpy customers. I may not be able to please everybody, but it's more important to be polite rather than to be rude back, you know? I also think Tom Stewarton does a pretty good job voicing Duncan. However, Duncan's new CGI model has a few problems, including his running board is painted red instead of white, but still, his CGI face suits him more than his original Season 12 counterpart. Number 17. Very important sheep. In this episode, Percy had to take some sheep only for him to accidentally breaking a cattle van, which causes the sheep to escape, and because of that, Thomas had to collect all the lost sheep and put them inside Annie and Clarabelle, much to the children's delight. If I could describe this episode into one sentence, it would be that this episode is Wonky Whistle done right. Unlike Wonky Whistle where Thomas was ignorant to his surroundings, Percy at least didn't realize he made a mistake. I even thought it was very funny when Thomas says, I need you to go to Farmer McColl's farm and collect his new spring lambs and ewes. And Percy replies, Me, sir? And then Sir Tom Hat says, No, ewes. Yeah, I thought that part was pretty funny. Overall, this was a very cute episode. Not only is it better than Wonky Whistle, but it's also better than Thomas and the Pigs and Muddy Matters. So therefore, I consider it the best of the Farmer McColl episodes in the CGI series, and I recommend it to anybody who loves farm animals. Number 16 is a tie between Cranky at the End of the Line and New Crane on the Dock. Cranky at the End of the Line is about Cranky getting old and creaky, and because of the extra work at the docks, Thomas and his crew quietly constructed another crane at night to help him the next morning, which turns out to be Carly. And in the follow-up episode, we see Cranky and Carly working together at the docks. They later started competing against each other only for them to get their hooks tangled up with each other. And because of that, Salty decides to tell a story about a two-headed monster who learned to work together and take turns. Let's talk about Carly for a minute. I honestly thought she was okay in both Season 21 and Big World Big Adventures. At least she looks better here than she does in All Engines Go. I also like her voice by Lucy Montgomery. It suits her perfectly, unlike in All Engines Go where she was voiced by a kid. Oh, and by the way, am I the only one who ships both her and Cranky? Because they would make a neat couple. However, the very best part of New Crane on the Dock has to be the reveal of Big Mickey as a Thomas character. You may recall that I put him as the #1 best Crane character in my top 5 Cranes in Thomas and Friends. And although Rob Rackshaw does a good job with his voice, but I think it should have been UK exclusive because his basis is actually American. I bet Jim Cummings would fit the role too. Number 15. Old Reliable Edward. In this episode, Gordon teases Edward about being old and slow, so Thomas plans to teach Gordon a lesson. Fun fact, this is very similar to the Season 6 episode, Edward the Really Useful Engine in terms of the plot. I like the part where Edward's branch line was mentioned for the first time since the 3rd season. And I thought it was pretty funny that Thomas made Gordon slow down on Gordon's Hill because it's like he's trolling him. Not to mention Clarabelle's grinning face at one point in the episode. Oh, and the red trousers bit was pretty hilarious too. In addition, the best part of the episode had to be the message that you should always say thank you after someone helps you out. This episode also reminds me of Edward Helps Out, aka Edward and Gordon in the UK, where Edward had to help push Gordon up the hill. And even he didn't say thank you to Edward at that time. But I'm thankful that Gordon finally agreed to let Edward help him out in the end. So therefore, this episode deserves a pass.